I had a faculty member like tell me like 2 months in, like wrote me an email saying that I needed to take my email signature down and that it was threatening because it had Black Lives Matter and because I had my pronouns in it and because they were afraid of the accent mark above my A for Julian. Yeah. And I said no. And my supervisor's like, it's not going down.
Welcome to Absolutely Not, the live podcast series dedicated to providing examples of setting personal boundaries at work and the vocabulary needed to name harm in those spaces. Thank y'all so much for being here today. I'm so grateful to everyone who keeps showing up and being a part of this growing community. Without y'all, we would not be growing, so thank you so much. The key words for this episode are mental health, reciprocity, and equity. I encourage you to look up the definitions of these words and compare them to the definitions that you carry with you on a daily basis. If you need help comparing, please let me know. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp allows you to connect with 24,000 licensed therapists in a safe and private online environment. You pay just a low flat fee for unlimited therapy with your therapist. Visit www.betterhelp.com/absolutelynot for more information and to get 10% off your first month. The link can be found in the show notes. Today's episode is titled How Letting Go Can Save Your Life. I know, we saving lives. And that message is brought to you today by my amazing special guest, Julián Lugo-Castañeda, him. He is an admissions counselor for multicultural recruitment in Grand Rapids, Michigan. When Texas roots meet West Michigan, the church meets the gay, and people-pleasing turns to illness. He is a bridge maker who wants to deliver on how letting go can save your life and how it's saving his. His identities are Hispanic, Mexican American, and gay. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
I'm so excited for you to be here today. Your bio, oh, I love it. I love it. We're going to get into it. And I love that you have shared your identities with us. But what I really hate is the fact that I have to let go to save my life. Do I have to do that? Is that true?
I think after the session, that might be something that you'll have to consider. You think you might have to wait and see and find out. For me, yes. And I'll share what, you could take it literally or hypothetically, but I'll give some different tools and reasoning why we say that. And hopefully the guest and you will kind of piece it all together once we have some questions answered. So.
Okay. And so the title of this episode is How Letting Go Can Save Your Life. When did you start letting go? What have you let go recently?
What I guess to the first question to answer of letting go is probably I've been struggling with like the validation of other people my whole life. From starting with my family, from the people that like I looked up to in school, like the leaders in school, right? Our teachers, our school counselors, things like that, people in the workplace. Like because I didn't get that as a child, I believe that like that's what I've been seeking as an adult. And I've had to let that shit go because it was turning me sick. I did not have my own voice. And for my own mental health, I had to start letting that go. And those are all wrapped up in my Hispanic identities, being queer, growing up in the US, but also wrestling with why I have to whitewash myself down and wait in spaces to fit in and to belong. And that didn't really start happening until my junior year of college, which was almost 2.5 years ago, about 3, graduated in 2020 in the spring.
I cannot think, like I'm already about to cry because I So many powerful words just in that one answer to the question. It's the whitewashing. What came to mind is the identity crisis that a lot of us have gone through as people pleasing people. You talked about how your identities played a role. Do they play a role now in your process of letting go?
My identities still play a role. Those haven't left and they never will. My letting go has. And that's the thing that I'm working on. I realized I never had to or should have changed any part of who I am. That was naturally what came. It was the validation and how I respond. And I didn't know how to, and I didn't have the tools. And so that's what I'm doing now. And I'm aware, and I'm going to put you in check, just like I'm going to put me in check.
And I'm going to put you in check just like I would. Oh my gosh. And we talk about this often on the show. Most of the time, those boundaries that we're putting out into the world, they're actually the boundaries that we've set with ourselves. What has been some of the boundaries you've set with yourself recently?
Like you've been saying, drinking lots of water. I am proud to say this is my 7th cup today. 7 cups. One sec. I'm about to go off. I'm just kidding. Not being silent in the workplace, even if it isn't a toxic environment. Don't confuse my hard work and being quiet as I'm not going to speak up when needed for myself. So I think a lot of people confuse like take my kindness and like humbleness as like a sign of like, well, you're so humble and kind, like, you know, we're not gonna expect you to use your voice to speak up. No, that's not what it is, darling. That's because that's how I am for myself, and I'm thankful that you get to experience that, Ara. But I'm still gonna use my voice, and it's taken time to be like, you know what, I'm gonna use it. So definitely like using my voice like when needed, not feeling afraid to speak up, whether that's good like praises or like also just like things that like conversations often uncomfortable that need to be had. um Drinking water, like I said, also leaving spaces that are uncomfortable for me or where I feel like are not being, even if it's inclusive to me but exclusive to someone else, I'm either going to speak up or straight up just leave. And you can sit in your exclusive space too. So just kind of those are some of the things that I've been having to work on that I'm doing. Katrina, your face.
And people say that all the time, but so I create safe spaces for a living. But even though that may be true, I still felt shots. Like I still felt shots like, oh wow, my exclusive space or whatever. But that you talked about how you respond to what's going on. That's something we're able to control. We are able to control what we respond to. So, like you said, even though it's inclusive for you, if it's excluding other people, you're still standing up to that. You're still being vocal about it. How have people received that? How have they responded?
Well, thankfully, yes, like you said, like I can't control what other people do, and thank God I don't have to. But like you said, we do like, and sometimes we just don't know, but we can control what we do, right? And how we respond. And even though that sounds something like so simple, it is something that takes sometimes often a while to learn. Um, Thankfully, I haven't had to do that recently. My employment is really awesome about that. Um, but lately, that's been like, that was my church and my family. Yeah.
Um, so I am no longer a part of the church. So and like we talked about, you have to let things go that are like you don't feel safe there anymore. You don't feel like you belong anymore. But I completely resonate with the church. Like those are one and the same. My family like ran the church. Like they're often very one and the same. What kind of boundaries or what kind of conversations have you had to have with those communities?
Well, it my grandma started a church. She started an apostolic Pentecostal church. I don't know if you've ever heard of that kind of denomination, but it's very charismatic. You can't sit down and listen to the message. You have to be running around the church. You're like rebuking evil spirits at the pulpit and throwing people down, throwing blankets over them, you know, telling them that they have to reject their identities because that's what's sending them to hell. And if they don't reject it, then that means they're just refusing to take the truth and receive what the truth is that God wants. Um, and I watched my family do that for years until like my mom finally left when I was 10 because they told her that she couldn't cut her hair and that she was sinning because she was wearing pants. Um, and there's a whole story about that, but I had my mom learn from her mom that you do not question authority, and what is placed for you you must respect, and you got to stay in it. Doesn't matter if you're uncomfortable, you're not leaving that space. And my mom learned to do that. When I came out as gay, she told me I was going to hell, and she stayed in spaces that were exclusive and would, often get upset and triggered when I told her, well, I don't have to stay in that space anymore, and I'm going to build my own community now. And that could be some people still in the church, and it may not, but it doesn't have to look like the community that you're choosing to stay in. But I'm not going to anymore, and so like that's like a boundary like that I have. Like, yeah, I'm just not doing it.
And excuse me, while little Katrina is trying to process your journey with you, I just resonate so much. One of the things that I really wish little Katrina had heard earlier in her life is just the community that you built does not have to look like the communities that you came from. It can look so different. It can be whatever the fuck you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Who told you that? Like, where did you get that information? I needed it.
I had to learn that, and I had to learn to let go of those communities so that I can grow into who I am today and build and have communities like the one I have with you right now, like the one that you're building. We literally had to build those through our trauma. Um, and it's sad that it took those things and experiences to go through, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. And like, I'm sure like you wouldn't either. And like you experience the joy, even if you're crying, listening to these shows and having these spaces, like the fact that you get to share these spaces with people from all over and experiences, like I'm sure that's so fulfilling. And I'm sure looking back, you're probably like, who am I? How did I get here? But you're exactly who you are, and you're like building and becoming more and more the person that you're wanting to be, which is amazing.
Leave me alone. Like, what? Okay. Thank you so much. And I'm sure everyone who's listening to this is taking on these affirmations as they need it and as their past selves needs it. One of the things that's so important is to realize that these events happen all around our lives, like in work and outside of work. And you talked about your family and in the church. In the workplace, has there ever been anyone who's been with you, supporting you, and setting these new boundaries and creating these new communities?
In my current employment, not my past employments. My current employment, and if you want like to hear kind of like that story, please let me know. But it is kind of a little long. But my current employment, my supervisor has been so good about like creating the space, like saying like if we have like 4 weeks of PTO that we can use per year. Like on top of like the already 10 plus holidays we get off for the calendar year. Like they said just off the bat, like you do not need to leave like a reason of why you're taking PTO off. You don't need to include what it's for. Just take it off. Like I will approve it, which I've never heard before because everywhere I've done that has been like, what are you using with it? Like, what are you gonna do? Like almost like if it's not something they think is worthwhile, like they don't deserve to give it to you, which has been awesome. They are also challenging me to say if there's something that I'm about to do or I put out for the college or that I don't understand, like please correct me. Like let's have a conversation. I want to learn and grow with you. And something that we tell our students is we want to learn to like train and become communities that say come together and say, how can I understand where you're coming from, and how can you understand where I'm coming from, instead of I'm coming into this conversation telling you, just gonna listen just to tell you how you're wrong and why I'm right. Those people you've often come across where like you're talking and they you can tell they think they're listening, but they're not. They're literally like muted you off, and then, all right, you're done. Well, you're wrong and I'm right. Well, that's kind of like what we're trying to do the opposite of, which has been amazing. And I've never had anywhere that's done that. And I had a faculty member like tell me like 2 months in, like wrote me an email saying that I needed to take my email signature down and that it was threatening because it had Black Lives Matter and because I had my pronouns in it and because they were afraid of the accent mark above my A for Julian. Yeah. And I said no. And my supervisor's like, it's not going down. So
I'm just trying to figure out what is threatening about that. Like, but I mean, that once again, I cannot control the actions of others. I can only control what I'm going to do. So your response is like noteworthy. The ability to say, no, I'm not changing that. Like, this is part of who I am. This is the culture and heritage I'm bringing into this space. And I will not change that for y'all. I'm so happy that you have supportive people in your workplace to move that forward, to move the conversations forward in safety and in just what I wrote down was like the relinquishing of power. Like the people who are over you or have positions over you who have power and their ability to relinquish that power creates safer spaces. I mean, you are not those people, but like, how did they do that? Like, how did they learn that from somewhere?
They can play dumb, but I won't. I'm not going to try to make sense of it because it just doesn't make sense. So the thing I stood up for that I'm proud of was that I stood like, I'm not moving. I'm not changing who I am. I'm no longer bringing half of myself in spaces anymore. I've done that. I'm not doing that anymore. You can try to get me fired. Let's see, didn't happen. So let's keep going.
And I know that in your bio, you talked about people pleasing turning into an illness and kind of past employers kind of being examples of how bad it can be in the workplace. Could you talk a little bit about the illness part of people pleasing?
Yeah, so really started with the family, like I said, really like seeking that validation. My family, we have the Mexican American background. All of my family are Texans. We call ourselves Tejanos. To the point where literally, like, my dad was the singer Selena's bodyguard at one of her concerts, which is pretty cool. And he has the photo. But ironically, some of my family hate our ethnic cultural background, that they don't even want to like speak Spanish or bring up foods or things that we do or different ethnic singers or things like that. Like they just don't want to talk about it, to telling people that before they come across the border, they need to speak and know English first, things like that. And that's like my own family. So coming from that and like completely disagreeing and feeling torn between these two identities and like why I was born here and like how come I get to have these privileges and like my brothers and sisters who are born on the other side of the border do not have these same privileges. I really wanted that validation so bad, but my family wasn't going to be the community to give that to me. Fast forward to graduating from college with my bachelor's degree in 2020. Well, that year, what happened? The pandemic hit. I still feel like we're in 2020. Just feels like 2 years passed. I graduated May, and as you probably have known, the market, like no one was like wanting to hire that year, especially towards May, because companies and organizations didn't know if they were even going to exist, or who was going to leave, or who they had to let go to save like the budget. So people just were not hiring, or posts weren't up, So the first job I got employed at was in July of 2020. A few months after my graduation. And a week before my 3-month evaluation in October, a meeting was put on my schedule the day of that did not exist the day before. And the week before that, they had just hired a third party HR party to evaluate the company, the organization, and schedule 20-minute meetings with each of us. So I had only known this person for 20 minutes. The next week, when I had that calendar invite put on my calendar, was my supervisor and the HR person. So I was like, oh, what's going on? Um, and the first thing they said was, you're probably confused of like what's going on. Cause like I have weekly supervisions every week with my supervisor for half an hour. I was just confused of why the HR person was in there. They said, well, these are the things we look for in our organization. Um, and unfortunately, we don't think that you fit our culture. So we're going to have to let you go. Don't bother coming back tomorrow. Mind you, this is like 2 p.m. Come back at 5. We'll have box ready for you. We'll have someone watch you pack up your office and give you 10, 15 minutes so we can make it quick. And I was like, okay, like, can I please know why you're letting me go or what happened? And they said, no, by law, we're not required to tell you because Michigan's an at-will state. So we don't have to give you a reason, and we're not going to. We just ask that you respect our wishes and that you depart peacefully and go. So I left like shocked, got home, cried, came back 2 hours later in a sweat and hoodie and packed to my office while my supervisor watched me and left. What's interestingly enough is this organization was the one I went to when I was 6, when I was sexually abused at 6. The person who they had me watch my office was my therapist, my caseworker, who was like one of the top managers there now, which was even more traumatizing. So it was just a hoot and a half.
I cannot thank you enough for sharing that experience with us, because it is just so, like, this happens consistently throughout America. Like, people are randomly put into meetings and then, oh, you just don't fit anymore. Like, oh, we can't explain to you why you don't. And you'll never, especially when you have intersecting identities, you'll never know what the fuck it was. Maybe it's because I was Black. Maybe because I have a uterus. Maybe it's because I'm queer. I'll never fucking know. But because of that, we are just even more hyper vigilant in the next space. We're just like, well, let me just put a timer on, put a stopwatch on, because I don't know when the boot is going to drop. Do you feel like that in this? I know you said they're in a safe space now, but do you ever have feelings like that? Like, oh my gosh, I have no idea when the boot's going to drop.
Yes. So that was the next point I was going to make, was even though I'm in a safe space now, like I didn't realize then that it was trauma. But after that, I had 2 other jobs after that and before I took this job, which I've been in this role for 10 months now. But even during those jobs and coming into this job, like every day, like if I got an email saying, hey, do you have a few minutes to talk? Or, you know, hey, like, are you free? Like, can I talk to you for a sec? Like in person? Like I like thought, or like if I didn't do the project right, or if it didn't go through, like I would be thinking like, oh, like I'm gonna be let go now, or like I'm gonna have that meeting, like it's just something that like I just every day, like in like workplaces, like I just have so much anxiety, like wondering like if and when I'm gonna be let go because of that experience. And I've had to learn like, oh my gosh, like that was horrible and that was shitty, but I'm not gonna let my current experience take away from what happened. I can't control that, and I couldn't have done anything differently, like what I did or not, to like make that meeting that happened not happen. It was gonna happen regardless. But and it could still happen, but I'm gonna choose to live in this moment right now and put forth my best work. And if it isn't good enough, then it may not be good enough one day. But I'm gonna keep investing in myself, and I'm gonna keep like on this journey that is authentic to me. And if I keep doing that, I'm never going to truly lose or miss out on what's meant for me. I'm only going to get closer to the communities that are closer and closer to who I am, and getting that position or that community that is going to provide that workplace, that forever family.
Mm, I once again, a little younger Katrina really needed that, like so much needed that. When the same events occurred to me, I internalized a lot of it. I was like, well, I'm a piece of shit. Like, I obviously did not deserve that good paying job. I obviously did not deserve, because it's so dehumanizing the way that they do it. Like, people watch you pack up your shit, and then everybody in the office has to watch you walk out. Like, it's so, and so I just internalized a lot of that. I know that you said you're currently still processing it and ensuring that you're telling yourself, like, even if that occurs again, I mean, it doesn't mean shit about me. I'm still moving forward. Are there any affirmations that you're telling yourself, or any tools or software that you use daily to kind of remind yourself that I'm still that bitch?
Yes. I practice morning mindfulness, like even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes, like when I'm getting ready in the mirror, or the first thing when I wake up. Like one thing that I started was I'm not checking my phone. I don't check my phone until I've meditated, prayed, stretched, and then got to work. I may have missed some things, but that's like my time. Like again, talking boundaries, like that's my boundary. I'm not gonna look or start my day reading everything I have to do, or like people
Mm.
talking to me. Like I wanna get grounded first. And even if I'm not completely grounded, like I'm gonna invest like the first hour of my day in getting myself ready, and getting my mind in a healthy space that's gonna be open to what may or may not come that day. And so that's something that I do. I don't have like a particular mindfulness app. Um, I follow Roddy, who is Jay Shetty's wife. Jay Shetty is the number one podcaster for health and wellness in the world. And they just put out a book called Living Like a Monk. And there's different tips of like boundary setting and mindfulness, and his life living as a monk in the ashram for 5 years across the world, and now being the number one influencer and podcaster, which is super popular right now in the US. And they have a YouTube channel, and Roddy, his wife, just started posting mindfulness videos and routines and different breathing exercises. That's the other one, is I try to do like a few breath exercises and breath work in the morning, in the middle of the day, or just when I feel tense or anxious, and then before I go to bed
Hmm.
too.
And see, these are the skills that, like, we're not introduced to. It's like nobody in my family or nobody in my communities prior to building communities like this kind of gave us these skills. So I appreciate you sharing that with my community. I can't thank you enough. Is there anybody in your support system that you'd like to shout out on the episode? Who's supporting you currently? Do they have names?
Yes. The only other one that's in this besides us is Katie, who's listening. She's one of my coworkers at Aquinas, where we work. Katie is a big support. Um, my dad, uh, Furman, Lugo in Texas and Austin. Um, my boyfriend, who's upstairs sleeping because he's a sixth, seventh, and eighth grade teacher and just had a long day and had to talk to parents and has grading until 9 tonight. Um, yeah, my communities of color, my Black, Indigenous, people of color, my Hispanic and Latinx community, um, my Boys and Girls Club community, so many of these communities that I've been a part of.
And I love that you mentioned several communities, because I think a lot of people have in their brain like, okay, I'm gonna just find one people's and that's all I'll need. No, you need several. You need different lanes of like what you're going to them for, and know what you're going to them for. I remember earlier we talked about like recalculating your feed and making sure you're cleansing people out. Do you want to shout out any people you have cleansed out lately?
Well, a lot of people from high school, a lot of family, a few uncles and aunts and cousins in Texas who are just exclusively a part of the church, and they will not talk to anybody else who is outside of the church or queer people. So even my own cousins on my dad's side, I've unfollowed and unfriended. Yeah, a lot of people, yeah, just a lot, mostly been family and past friends that like I've just had on there for years, but like serve no purpose or like in my current present life, nor feed into me, nor I pour into. Um, Even just people who post to, like something I posted is like we can agree and disagree about pizza toppings, but not about racism. Like, so if you post some stupid shit that is just like completely ignorant, like or just like homophobic or anything like that, like I immediately like you're just unfriended. Like if that's like the people you want to be around and like that's fine, you can be in that space, but I'm not gonna have that energy around me. Um, and I'm not gonna have you as part of my network because two, if someone else I include in my network and I have you and they're seeing those things and that's a trigger or exclusive, I'm not gonna, I don't wanna put them in harm's way either. Um, so just those are a few different things.
That last line hits so much. Like when we have those types of people in our community, we're exposing the people that we actually love to that type of energy. Like you are making the people that I have that I know are good for me sick because you're bringing that sickness in it. Oh, shout out your mug, by the way. I really like your mug.
Brought to you by Katrina's podcast series. Absolutely not, because we absolutely won't. So yeah, thank you for the cup and for the gift box.
Oh, I love it so much. Before we wrap up today, there are a lot of people who are going to hear this and resonate just as little Katrina has resonated with your story. And some of them are going to be fearful about being authentic at work, even though they have been inspired by your words. What would be the top 3 tips you would share with them about getting past that, removing the illness from their lives, and ultimately saving their life?
So I would say that the top 3 tips and advice that I have for you guys and anybody else who is gonna watch this message or see the recording when you post it online or on LinkedIn on your page. First, be okay with letting go of the communities that you were raised and were brought up in and build your own now. That happened. That is not what the present day is like. And if it's not serving you, it needs to go. Number 2, drink lots of water. I am not gonna get, violated, have 75 different code switches, and not be eating just to be having these conversations with you in the workplace and dehydrated without water. I'm gonna sip my water first. And third, create spaces when have in mind that when you're in the workplace and you're having spaces that you want to be inclusive and safe for you, keep in mind who is being excluded and unsafe in the process too. So just some things to think about as well.
Oh, and they shall be thought about. Thank you so much for sharing those tips. You know what? I haven't drank a lot of water today, so thank you for reminding me. The, another sip. Um, there are so many people who are going to resonate with your story and who are going to really take away from it that we have the power to write our own, like we have the power to write our own stories. We have the power to create our own communities. So I can't thank you enough for just bringing that energy into this space. Are there any last minute sprinkles that you'd like to share with the audience before we go?
Well, first, you're the sprinkle, Katrina. The fact that you are providing this space, had you not provided this space and stayed true to your work and true to your passion, this would have never existed if you would have doubted yourself and stayed in those areas. But it's only able to exist because you believed in yourself and you didn't stop going. So I would encourage you to not give up and to keep being authentically who you are so that people like me can continue to share these spaces and our voices for everybody else who's going to listen to that. So I would say it's you.
What the fuck? I did not ask for this, but thank you so much. And I hope anybody who's listening takes that away as well. Like, just keep going. When I started this podcast, well, nobody listening to it. Like, nobody liked my shit. But just keep going. Like, stay true to your mission. And like, my whole bag is creating safe spaces to have these conversations that nobody has heard before. I definitely needed to hear this shit today. I'm in our third season and I still needed to hear this shit. So thank you so much for sharing it with us today. To everybody who's listening and to everybody who's taking notes rapidly right now, I cannot thank you enough for continuing to show up to this space. And I hope that you keep setting boundaries. We'll see you next time on Absolutely Not. Bye. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to Absolutely Not. Your support means the world to me. You can always further support the show by leaving a review or visiting the Support the Mission page on my website, www.katrinastroll.com. My website is also where you can register for upcoming live episodes, watch amazing past episodes of Absolutely Not, and buy Absolutely Not merch. Yay! Until next time, keep setting those boundaries and saying absolutely not to anything unaligned. See you next time.